Junior Volleyball Association presents Sideline Strategy, a volleyball podcast. This week's episode features Orlando Valkyries head coach Amy Pauly as she discusses how her team prepared for year 2 of the Pro Volleyball Federation.
Going into year 2, I think, is completely different than last year from like team building, culture, everything. And one of the best things I think we have going for the Valkyries is that we have a really solid group of returners coming back, as you had mentioned. And being able to talk to them about what was good last year, what needs to change this year, what do we really want to make the Orlando Valkyries about, is going to be really helpful. Because last year it was just kind of me being like, hey, here's what's important to me. I hope that you guys buy in. And I was really lucky with the athletes that we did have on our roster last year. They were extremely respectful, wanted to be great, totally bought into what we were doing. But now that we have this group returning, we get to make it our own thing together. And I'm always a big proponent of player empowerment, and the best teams are player led. And so now it's going to have a little bit more accountability and leadership coming from them. So in this off season, we actually made a leadership group within our team. So we identified 3 individuals that we wanted to lean on for a lot of that culture stuff that was mentioned. And we'll start meeting with them here regularly now that we're two months away from report date, which is terrifying to think about, but exciting at the same time. And we'll start going over what are our key words that we want to make sure we can always have on hand. What does it mean to be a Valkyrie? What do practices need to look like? How are we going to hold each other accountable? And I really like the group of people that I have in that. They're young, but they're seasoned as well at the same time. And so I really trust them to do what they think is best for this organization and not just themselves. One of the areas that we focused on in the off season was actually looking at factors, like winning factors within the PVF. So what does your hitting efficiency need to be? What does your attack efficiency need to be, or your kill percentage? All the way down to like, how do you transition off of digs? We tried to get into all of the nitty gritty stats of what made teams successful in the PVF last year. And then we were very fortunate to be able to do the same thing with all of the Olympic teams. So we took the stats from the Olympics, compared them to PVF. We're definitely leaning on the PVF stats more than the Olympics because the Olympics is the best of the best of the best coming together for 3 weeks. But for us, that is going to give us some benchmarks to really give to the team from day one when they walk in the door of, this is what our outsides need to be hitting. Here's how we need to be scoring from our middles in transition. We need to be getting this many aces per game. And I think, to me, the more wise you can give players, the easier it is for them to go, all right, I know this is why we need to accomplish this. So I'm going to give my little bit of extra effort in getting my serves in on that day. Or we know that a team is, can't pass from zone 1 inside out. So I'm really going to be effective in my zone 1 serving. Just little things along those lines. And so for us, like I said, the big thing was identifying the key stats that it takes to win. And now that allows us to make some benchmarks for our team. Out of season, we're not looking at too much film. We were when we were identifying athletes that we wanted to bring into the organization this year. But for now, I think that with everybody on a 1-year contract and the free agency going, if you get too bogged down and this is what happened last year, you might be a little bit behind, because every team has changed this year. Every team's going to have a new star or a new go-to player, and new stars will emerge, which is going to be even more fun. And so for us, it was just, let's stick to the numbers, because those are probably going to be pretty reliable, I think, instead of going player to player by team. It certainly is film study is certainly part of the scouting reports when you're looking at other teams. I think for our organization, we are certainly going to utilize it more this year for our own gym. Like I said, last year, I think it was new to everybody, and figuring out schedules and gym use and time management a little bit was new to everybody in the PVF. And so now we go, all right, we know we have this many hours in the day. We're going to use all of those hours and we're going to, watch more film or make sure we're getting more rehab in. But film is certainly a very important piece to getting better as a player, identifying what it is you're good at and what you need to get better at. And then in terms of scouting, it's absolutely identifying people's patterns, how they hit the ball, where they, like I said, a great example is, can they side out if you're serving to zone one? And sometimes numbers don't show that. I am very old school when it comes to scouting. I have my young assistant and my older assistant both love numbers. They're huge tech people. And I'm there with like my pen and paper still, like, oh, I want to make sure that this pattern is right, and charting hitters and side out efficiencies. And I think the best way to scout is to utilize both of those things, because there are some patterns that you might recognize that don't show up on a stat sheet. And one of my favorites is, what do they do after timeouts? You don't always stat a timeout, but when you're watching the film and you're using, pen and paper, you're identifying, hey, they always tip after a timeout, or they always set the middle after a timeout. And so that's a little thing that you can kind of keep in your back pocket for game management. I think we are extremely blessed with our healthcare that we have with the Orlando Valkyries. From day one, we had a partnership with Advent Health, who has provided us with a team doctor, a team ortho, a team athletic trainer. So we have kind of been really, really well taken care of. And I would say that my approach to that is just utilizing them, is making sure that I am communicating with them on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis, depending on, where we are at in the season. Our athletic trainer comes to every practice, so I get to pick her brain about injuries. But really, for the most part, we just kind of make sure it's a cohesive effort to plan our calendar. That's number one, is we're always going to load our calendar up, and we can always back away. If we feel like we need to cancel a practice or shift something around, at least it was on the calendar. I think the worst is to have a light calendar and then go, hey guys, we need to practice more. And I think that rubs everybody the wrong way. So I try to make it look like we're going to have the hardest preseason in the world and then throw an off day in there for them. But just talking to using that leadership committee, using our athletic trainer, and talking to them about, how does their body feel? Is this a no jump day? But we try to plan those things in early on so that we're kind of aware of how much the body is being used during preseason. I would say about 50% of our practice is serve and serve receive, and maybe even like 70%. Actually, it's a lot. So we're always getting extra reps with our passers. Last year, I think one of the things that I really liked about our practice block was, at least 2 days a week, we have just our passers come in for 30 minutes, and we get all of their passing work out of the way, so that when the whole team gets in the gym, now we're focused on our 6-on-6, certain game situations that we might need to work on, but we're making sure that we are getting a lot of passing reps, because that is one of those skills that I think if you're not repping it out, then you kind of lose the mental focus of it. So we always do individuals. In terms of serving, I think that is a skill that every team needs to practice more of. I think a lot of times it's just, hey, go back to the end line, serve for 3 minutes, and then move on. And one thing that we do is we make it very specific. So it might be one round, you have 10 balls. You have to serve line to line. We have a coach statting certain things. So the things that we look for are no spin, under the height of the antenna, and then accuracy. So we actually go for, we stat each area of that serve and then give them an efficiency based off of that. So it's not just, hey, serve to zone one and be mindless about it. We try to make them really mindful about what they're doing. And then every day we'll have a 6-on-6 drill that is incorporating serve and pass somehow. So whether it's rewarding them for maybe not a reward is the right word. You can only win if you're passing well, sort of drill, and put the pressure on the serve receivers. I think of the setter hitter connection as flossing. It's something that you have to do every day. And if you kind of don't pay attention to it, you can kind of bop around, and then you'll come back to a game and you'll be like, man, that looks off, or something doesn't feel right in there, And so I think even just a simple hitting lines every day to make sure that they're in the right tempo, they're on the right step, the setters feel like they're flowing pretty well. And giving them that opportunity to do the easy stuff with no pressure, so that when you get into the game-like situations, it comes more natural. I don't know where this originated. I'm going to say this is like an old Russ Rose tactic, because my first boss coached under Russ, so I feel like it's very much just like a pass down, but I know that a lot of people feel this way. I limit the runs to 3. So a side out plus 2 for the other team, and we're calling a timeout. Like, you do not let anybody get on a run further than that. And if they serve a great serve out of that timeout, then kudos to them, but I got to try to kind of stop it while it's going. And in those timeouts, we keep it very factual. Take a deep breath. We know what they're serving, but let's talk about how we're actually going to get the kill off of this. So we talk to the setter about what they should set on perfect passes, and then what the bailout set is, along with where the attacker should go in a medium ball situation. And just say, even if we don't get that first ball kill, let's make sure we set ourselves up in a way that we can transition out of this and try to get that, try to get out of the serve receive rotation. When it comes to timeouts, I do try to keep it, like I said, as factual as possible. There are times, maybe you're really getting beat, and it's all you can say to the team is, you got to make a change. Like, I can't do anything for you out there. This is a mental thing. You've got to go. But hopefully you are in the situations where you're talking about how to side out. If you're on that end of the coin, if you're on the other and you're serving and the opposing team calls a timeout, then we're talking about what our block strategy is. So we're serving to zone 1, and we're, commit blocking here or there, depending on what that team's patterns are. And from there, it's just next point, worry about the next point, and move on. But, maybe there's a couple times when I'll have taken some notes of, this outside has scored in the donut 3 times. I want to give a great refresher to our left front about playing off blocker defense. So those are kind of the little notes that I take during the game. And then I have an offensive and a defensive coordinator as our coach, who's doing the charting and the patterns for those, factual timeout situations. Yeah, I think the serving strategy, if you have the tools, you're going to be able to have the stats on it from scouting the teams. You're going to be able to say, I can serve, to in their row 3, I'm serving to zone 5 because they're only siding out at 120. A computer is going to be able to do that for you if you have the stats. I think if you don't have that ability to do that, and there's so many coaches around the country that they don't have volumetrics or data volley or things like that. It's just determining and charting during the game of what each passer is passing, even as simple as a 1, 2, 3 scale. And then you can look down at your paper and you can go, all right, I at least know that this player is not passing the ball in front of the 10-foot line, and we're going to keep targeting her to give her an opportunity. At our level, I think we try to get as specific as possible, like I said, with figuring out if it hits that athlete's platform and they can't side out for some reason, even though they might be passing perfect, their team just can't side out. That is the strategy that we're going to go with. During the match, we look for our side out, we look at our earned side out. So we try to eliminate any of the missed serves that the other team has. and really just focus on what are we doing well to put us in the situation to get out of those rotations faster. So we always want to start our match in our best earned side out rotations, because then we won't get stuck in them as often. And then on the flip side of that is point scoring. Which one of our servers is going back to the end line, and who are we scoring the most points off of? And if we can, find a way to blend those two things together, then I think we'll be really successful. Sometimes they don't match up, and then you have to look at, what are my hitters hitting? What are their efficiency numbers? And again, who can I keep in the front row to point score? I think point scoring and kills is the biggest indicator of if you're going to win matches. You have to get points now. Every team goes on runs. I think that's very different than where we were maybe even 10 years ago. It was all side out, side out, side out, but people are serving the ball very hard. And I think it's really hard to side out now because there's not as much perfect passing. And so you got to find a way to get your team in the best point scoring opportunities. We're really lucky that we have all three of our blockers, middle blockers, coming back, because we're not having to reteach strategies. And so we don't do a lot of commit blocking in terms of, I want you to 100% go block that outside or that slide. We'll do a lot of what we call hedging. So if the ball is pulled that way, maybe we hedge one way, maybe a setter actually goes against the flow, so we hedge the other way. But again, it's really just looking at patterns and tendencies of other teams, and then and kind of changing and being flexible from there. And I think when you have a group of middles that you feel confident you can do that with, it's all about practicing those situations. So we work on specific scouts and specific hedges or commits in practice before we just throw them into the game, because defense is such a unit. Like, your defenders have to know what your middles are doing. And so we work on, hey, if they're committing that way, let's make sure we shift one way or the other, but really just utilizing it in practice before we get into the game. I wish I had a great answer for you. I think this is a little bit team to team specific. I think your serve and pass needs to be, as best as you can, loose but focused. That's going to come from the culture of your team, right? And the culture of your leaders. Can you have a group of people that are saying, we know that if I have bad passes and serve and pass, it's not going to be indicative of how I play in the game, but also not so on edge and focused that you're kind of riling everybody else up. Because the way I like to think about it is, your serve and pass, you're revving your engine, but you're not full go, because you don't want to empty the tank before you've gotten to the game. And so you got to have a little bit of juice in there. You got to jump hard. I think you need to kind of practice how you play, but it's fast. It's about 45 minutes. Don't empty your tank. Have some left for game time.